We often view apologetics as a bridge between faith and reason, but in practice it often functions as something else, a closed system of belief. In this system, the goal isn't to follow the evidence where it leads, but to find evidence that fits a pre-existing conclusion. Social media becomes a feedback loop, reinforcing confidence in claims that often lack independent verification outside the system itself. It creates a psychological fortress. Every piece of data is filtered, every contradiction is harmonized. The headlines are bold, designed to provide certainty, but that certainty is produced by the system, not the data. When everything confirms the doctrine and nothing is allowed to challenge it, you aren't doing science or history, you're maintaining a loop. Materialism is dead. ID wins. It's a closed circuit, a wall of claims impenetrable from the outside. To stay inside, one must filter out the very tools designed to find the truth: empirical science, historical criticism, and falsifiability. When these filters are removed, the system doesn't just change, it collapses, because a system built on doctrine deciding the evidence cannot survive the evidence itself. Confidence is not the same as truth, and a system that is closed to correction is ultimately closed to reality. Apologetics functions as a closed loop. Breaking it requires looking outside the system. I grew up in the Faroe Islands, shaped early by a decisive and unshakable doctrinal commitment. Later, I encountered the same doctrinal commitment at the Danish Bible Institute in Copenhagen. People have the right to religious freedom. But starting with fixed doctrinal conclusions did not lead me to truth. Across the apologetics world, the same pattern appears. Institutions define the boundaries, and apologists work within them. Each apologist operates inside a defined doctrinal structure. Their arguments, methods, and conclusions all flow from these commitments. These doctrinal statements set the boundaries of inquiry. They determine which conclusions are acceptable and which are off limits. From James Tour to Wes Huff, the commitments are clear and foundational to their work. This is why William Lane Craig ends up defending the genocide of Canaanite infants as morally justified, why Frank Turek defends the existence of unverified giants, why Ken Ham insists on a global flood, why John Lennox rejects evolutionary biology despite overwhelming scientific consensus. These outcomes follow directly from doctrinal commitments that cannot be questioned. The Discovery Institute forms a separate branch. Its wedge document outlined a plan to defeat scientific materialism. In relation to doctrinal commitments I mentioned, here the commitment is materialism is false. So this leads to distrust in science, and they've been spreading lies and propaganda now for approx 30 years. It was a cultural strategy designed to wedge open the scientific world for Christian values. Meyer, Behe, and Dembski often said that ID was scientific. But here you see Meyer in the middle together with two inerrancy apologists. Yes, if you search with ChatGPT, Deep Research, or Copilot, you'll also find such religious connections. At the Dover trial, Judge Jones said this: "The overwhelming evidence at the trial established that ID is a religious view, a mere relabeling of creationism, and not a scientific theory." Think about this for a moment. According to ID proponents, science was supposedly far too committed to natural testable causes, and the proposed fix, the ghost causation principle. Michael Licona's story shows what happens when someone crosses a doctrinal boundary. When he suggested symbolic interpretation of the saints rising, he lost institutional support. He moved from one bounded institution to another, never into academic freedom. The real rule: you may investigate anything, as long as you reach the approved conclusion. Today, these conclusions are amplified by a massive media ecosystem. Reasonable faith and cross-examined reach hundreds of thousands. Every lecture becomes dozens of clips. Every debate becomes shorts, reactions, and commentary. Fan channels and AI editors multiply the content far beyond the original upload, and all of it is monetized. The revenue funds more production, which generates more revenue. Real inquiry requires freedom. Real understanding requires the possibility of being wrong. Only when we allow the evidence to lead, without predetermined conclusions, can we discover what is actually true.